It's been almost an entire year since Apple released the M2 MacBook Air, a laptop that at the time seemed to have some mixed reactions. On one hand, the M2 MacBook Air was exciting and new, but on the other, it came with some flaws, which we'll get to. That being said, while it still wasn't the MacBook that people expected from the leaks, the rumors, and the renders that they've seen on it, I do have to say that this thing is an absolute powerhouse and is my go-to recommendation for when I'm asked, what laptop should I buy? I have experience with and own a bunch of different laptops. I even have the M1 Air laying around here, but whether it's a gaming laptop, a thin and light Windows laptop, or a MacBook Pro, this thing is the one that I find myself gravitating toward on a regular basis. Before we get into it though, a like and a sub to the channel is always appreciated. We're like 500 subscribers away from 20,000, I think, at the time that I'm recording this, which is just like absolutely insane. So thank you all so much for the support that you're showing me. I really do appreciate it, and I honestly can't thank you enough. So thank you. Anyways, rather than diving into specs at first, I want to show you what you get and what you can expect with the M2 Air. The first thing that you're going to notice about this device is how thin it is. On one hand, it's almost non-existent. This makes a huge difference as a daily carry, as it only weighs 1.2 kilograms, which is virtually nothing for how premium and dense this thing feels. The inclusion of a large trackpad, which almost seems impossible for a laptop of this size, is an absolute bonus, and a really comfortable keyboard, which is basically my gold standard for when it comes to typing on a laptop. Not to mention that there's virtually no deck flex on this thing, and it's got full-size function row, which is just really nice to see, especially on a thin and light. Of course, the laptop has also kept the Touch ID from the M1 Air, although it's slightly larger and pretty damn accurate. I can't really ever recall myself having a time where I've needed to make another attempt at logging in. If there are any criticisms that I have with the laptop and its feature set, it would be that it only has 2 USB Type-C ports, just like the last. However, with the inclusion of the MagSafe connector, it does free up those 2 ports for whatever peripherals that you desire. There is also a 3.5mm headphone jack on the right side in case you wanted to hook up your favorite wired headphones, as well as if Bluetooth latency is a concern for you. Moving up to the display though, we got a 13.6-inch IPS display with a 2560 by 1664 resolution. While that 224 pixel density may not sound impressive, it's actually quite good. Whether you're on a couch, a bed, or at a table, a desk, you won't be noticing any individual pixels. It's quite a great display actually. If there's one critique that I had to make about this display though, it would be that Apple chose to make this panel 60 Hz as opposed to the ProMotion with a refresh rate of up to 120 like we've seen on the M1 Pro and M1 Max MacBook Pros. Now, this isn't really a huge deal, but it does kind of suck when you realize that there are Asus laptops with OLED displays at 120 Hz for about the same price, if not cheaper, on the market. So I just think Apple needs to work on that a little bit and kind of bump up that refresh rate for us, because that'll be really nice. I would have been okay with it just stepping up to 90 Hz, but I will say that this isn't a deal breaker by any means because the display does feel smooth and responsive. One benefit about this M2 MacBook Air over the M1 is that you have a taller aspect ratio. This will basically give you the same working area as the entire display of the M1 MacBook Air, including the Finder bar. And if that notch up there is an eyesore for you and it's preventing you from purchasing this machine, I honestly don't think that it's a big deal. By now, I'm just used to it, but having said that though, it doesn't really get in the way or take up any space considering it's locked in place of that Finder bar. And when you do decide to full screen an application, it disappears, though it does this whilst eliminating the entire top bezel, so it's kind of a mixed bag. But like I said, this hasn't really been problematic for me. It would have been nice if it housed a Face ID sensor, but of course, this is Apple shtick we're talking about. At least the camera inside of this thing is actually 1080p, which is just really cool to see. It's actually the exact same camera sensor that's inside of the M1 Pro and M2 Pro MacBook Pros, which is just cool considering they could have easily just taken the 720p webcam that's inside of the M1 Air. The microphones are also quite pleasing to listen to, and honestly, it'd be perfect for anything when it comes to video conferencing or FaceTime, though I wouldn't necessarily use this thing to start like a YouTube channel or a podcast, for example. The speakers on this thing also sound quite great. They're not really comparable to the M1 Pro MacBooks, but Of course, that is just kind of the theme of this whole video. They are underneath the keyboard deck, but they're clear and they're loud with pretty good bass response. I actually am kind of impressed with them. I watch YouTube videos and listen to music on this thing all day long without really batting an eye. When it comes to the performance of the M2 Air though, this is where things could get a little dicey depending on who you ask, and potentially even more costly. The model that I have here is the one that I recommend. It's the base model, and it's the most affordable and does everything that I need it to do. I've used this thing to edit short-based content using my A7C with 4K footage, and it handled it no problem. I believe that I can use this thing without a hitch to make the videos that I do now and not really have a problem with it. However, 256 gigabytes of storage may not be enough to comfortably make full-length content, unless I plan on using tons of SSDs or have a NAS to store my footage. If you plan on using this for content creation, just consider upgrading that, especially since the 256 gig SSD inside of the base model is also a single NAND SSD. It makes reading and writing much slower than the dual NAND drives like the 512 gigabyte version and up. And while I personally don't really have a problem with 8 gigs of unified memory, and I don't actually notice any slowdown in my workflow or when I'm browsing, if this is going to be your main machine, opting for 16 gigabytes would be a great idea, especially if you plan on doing anything that requires a lot more resources. The only problem with this now is the price. You're jumping from a $1,200 machine to a $1,600 machine. And if you decided to opt for the 10-core CPU, you're actually going up to 17. At that point, you're ever so close to the $2,000 MacBook Pro 14-inch with M2 Pro, or an M1 Pro, either brand new or refurbished, which you could find for probably less. Both of these machines will perform better at a heavy workload like photo editing, video editing, music production, etc. So I don't think it makes sense to buy the M2 MacBook Air if you're looking into getting a machine for the creative field or even computer programming. But that's not what the Air is for. It just turns out that it's powerful enough to do those things, which makes this decision kind of difficult. For me personally, the MacBook Air is a secondary device, or a tertiary device, I guess. I don't know. I have so many electronics on the go. It's kind of ridiculous. But in my use case for absorbing content like articles, watching YouTube, browsing through Twitter, emailing potential sponsors for the channel, and writing scripts, as well as the occasional short, this is hands down the best laptop that I would choose. There's just so many things with the M2 Air that I don't have to worry about, like battery life, for example. I can leave this thing unplugged for days, and when I pick it up, it's still got tons of battery life left for me to get what I need done. This is something that I can't say about the various Windows laptops that I've used, especially the ROG Strix, where carrying an external power supply is basically a must. And the fanless design, whilst it may not be for everyone, considering I don't push this laptop very hard, it's honestly so good. It never gets warm to the touch, and I don't have to listen to it worrying up. I do wish for the M2 Air to overtake the M1 Air though and hit that $999 price point, as I feel like $1,200 is just a big ask for a lot of people, but if you can get this thing with the Apple student discount from Apple or on sale, you won't have any regrets. Thank you all so much for watching this video. If you did enjoy it, leave a like down below, subscribe for more content. I'll see you all in the next one. Peace out.